All right, good morning. The August 2nd, 2022 School Land Board meeting will now come to order. Pursuant to section 31.015 of the Texas Natural Resources Code, I'm chairing this meeting in the commissioner's absence as chief clerk of the General Land Office, as the commissioner is away on state business. The August 2, 2022 meeting of the School Land Board is being held in person at 1700 North Congress Avenue, Stephen F. Austin Building, and by video conference call is authorized under Texas Government Code section 551.125. Access to the meeting by members of the public was published in advance in the Texas Register in accordance with the Texas Opens Meeting Act. Any member of the public who wishes to address the School Land Board should indicate so at the start of the meeting or during any public comment period. With that being said, first item on the agenda is item number 1, approval of the minutes from the July 5th, 2022 SLB meeting.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve the minutes. Next item on the agenda is item number 2, approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve the consent agenda. Next item on the agenda is item number 3.
Good morning. This is Amy Nunez with Coastal Field Operations. I'll be presenting item number 3, consideration and possible action on coastal easement 2022-0067 for Michael H. Krakauer. This project is located in Offutt's Bayou, Galveston County. This is an existing project in Galveston Bay. The property owner placed unauthorized fill and a new bulkhead over old shoreline riprap that was located on state-owned submerged land. This was done to make the shoreline safer and more stable. The contractor that completed the work told the property owner he had all the permits that were needed. The property owner has agreed to pay a $1,500 stipulated penalty for this unauthorized work, and this area totals 745 square feet. Standard calculated fill rate was high because of the location and configuration of the lot. Due to the safety concern that was addressed and the willingness of the property owner to bring this into compliance, staff is recommending $1 a square foot for the fill or $745 a year. All other components will be charged at the standard rate. Additionally, this project will qualify for the senior rate freeze once the fill rate has been established. At this time, staff is recommending $1 a square foot for this existing fill. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I have none and move to approve as presented.
Thank you. Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 3. Next item on the agenda is number 4.
Thank you.
Good morning, Deborah Cantu, Energy Resources. I'll be presenting item number 4, consideration and action on the performance of an online oil, gas, and other minerals lease sale in November 2022. Staff requests approval of 85 tracks as specified in the board memo for a November oil, gas, and other minerals lease sale. The following terms and conditions are consistent with previous leases. The royalty is either 1/5 or 1/4, depending upon the location and geology. Primary term will be 3 years for onshore and 5 years for submerged tracts. The rentals will be $10 per acre for years 2 and 3, and $25 an acre for years 4 and 5 for the submerged tracts. We also have 6 tracts in El Paso County for geothermal leasing. The minimum bonus per acre will be $5, and the royalty for all tracts will be 10% of gross revenue for a 10-year primary term. Any questions?
So to be clear, we have both tracks for oil and gas development as well as some geothermal leasing. We haven't seen any
Correct.
geothermal in a
Yeah,
while.
it's been about 10 years since the board last had geothermal tracks.
Wow.
Any questions from the board?
In El Paso County, that's West Texas. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. I have none. I motion to approve.
Second.
All right. Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve docket item number 4. Next
Thank you.
item on the agenda is number 5.
Good morning. This is Robert Hatter with Energy Resources Division. Docket item number 5 is an application by Anadarko E&P Onshore for a development agreement. The board has done similar types of agreements like this, probably half a dozen of those in the past. This particular application covers 3 state fee leases in Reeves County in close proximity to each other. They're all within the same block in Reeves County. The leases all have expiration dates of their primary term on October 8th of this year, 2022. The operator would need obviously to drill wells in order to extend the time frame of those leases. These are in the Delaware Basin in Reeves County, so they will require long horizontal wells and some pretty significant fracture stimulation in order for them to produce in paying quantities. All 3 of the leases are within existing 1,280 acre units which are named in the docket item: the Big Pug State, the Shiba Inu State, and the Greyhound State unit. All of those have been approved by the board now. It's the opinion of both staff and of the operator lessee, Anadarko in this case, that rather than having them drill one well in one section and then drill and then jump to the other section, and then in order to perpetuate these leases, which they could do, perpetuate the leases, it would be more efficient and it'd be better completion rates and therefore production and revenue for the permanent school fund and to the lessee if the board would allow them to develop these 3 sections as a group, so that the development on any one of the sections is as if it's development on the other sections. In return for that, that would allow them to more orderly develop the tracks because of the way that they are stimulated. It's best to drill a number of wells on a single track and then frack them all close together in time, so that you get better frack rates rather than jumping around from one track, fracking that one, then coming back to it later. In return for allowing that, the permanent school fund would receive for basically a 1-year time frame, $1,000 per acre paid to us up front for the agreement. Had to be paid prior, once the board has approved it and prior to that October 8th deadline. Also, the operator has agreed to drill at least 1 well by the end of that primary term, again, October 8th, 2022. And they've agreed to drill 6 additional wells by November of 2023 and 5 additional wells on top of that by November of 2024 for a total of 12 wells. And so with the 3 sections, those 12 wells would be equivalent to what we would ordinarily require in our leases, basically 4 wells a section, which matches our typical formula for acreage retention. Again, staff's reviewed this and believes it would get us 12 wells drilled faster, and then because there are drilling requirements in those units, as well as get the $1,000 per acre up front and result in better quality wells. If the board has any questions.
When was the original lease signed?
It would have been 3, they were 3-year primary terms. So it would have been 2019. October of 2019, they would have been bought at a lease sale. They're state fee tracks, so it would have been. So they're into their 3rd year.
Huh. I mean, Reeves County is probably one of the most active anywhere in the U.S. Why did it take them so long? Do you know?
They have a pretty significant. Well, I mean, I not to speak for them, but I believe the reason is that they have, Anadarko was acquired by Oxy, which has a significant amount of acreage on us. In order to develop it, they don't have unlimited funds to drill. And so they have to kind of pick and choose the wells that they drill based on the expiration terms dates of their leases. In this case, they had to acquire this particular block has a number of different lessees in it. So there were some trades that were needed in order to block up acreage in order to drill these wells. So, it's just given the sheer size of the Delaware Basin and how much acreage they hold, it's just in the nature of most of our lessees to try to drill the ones that they have to drill now based on the expiration dates of their leases, and then try to hold hold development until it's absolutely necessary to do. Like I said, they can go ahead and drill these wells, at least one well on each tract, and perpetuate these leases. But it would seem to be more efficient to us and to them
Yeah.
to allow them to go ahead and just drill and
No,
frack
Yeah, I agree
unit by
with that.
unit. So,
Yeah,
yes,
I
yes, sir.
agree with that. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. All right, you're welcome. And
I have
staff,
no-
okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have no further questions.
All right,
I
thank you.
motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carried unanimously to approve item number 5.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Items number 6 and 7 will be in executive session. School Land Board will enter executive session pursuant to Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Texas Government Code, for consultation with attorneys regarding matters involving attorney-client privileged information and legal issues associated with items number 6 and 7. Following the closed session, the board will reconvene and open to complete the docket.
We have Mike. Everybody's back.
All right, the open session of the August 2nd, 2022 meeting of the School Land Board meeting will resume with item number 6.
Good morning again, Deborah Cantu, Energy Resources. Staff recommends approval of the proposed lease by Chief Capital to its affiliate TD Minerals on the terms as presented in executive session. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
Move to approve.
I approve.
Is that a second?
Yeah, it's a second.
All right, motion is made and seconded, carries unanimously to approve item number 6.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, for the record, I'm Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. Approval of this agenda item would constitute your approval of an investment by TexGlow on behalf of the Permanent School Fund in Macquarie GIG Energy Transition Solutions. The Investment Advisory Committee is recommending that TexGlow invest $300 million on behalf of the PSF in MGETS. MGETS is a new $2 billion commingled investment fund sponsored by Macquarie Asset Management Europe that will invest in sustainable infrastructure and real assets, along with infrastructure enabling technology and services platforms capable of driving sustainable infrastructure solutions designed to facilitate the worldwide decarbonization process and to help accelerate the current global green energy transition. MAMES will utilize the investment experience of both Macquarie Infrastructure and Real Assets Europe and Macquarie Asset Management in managing the platform. As you know, Macquarie Asset Management is a global leader in infrastructure investment and asset management with approximately $500 billion of assets under management. In addition, the Green Infrastructure Group, or GIG, which is a division of Macquarie Asset Management, will work with the rest of the team members in the management of the fund. GIG is a specialist green investor and a global leader in the development of companies, assets, and technologies created to accelerate the global transition to net zero carbon emissions. TexGlow has a longstanding relationship with Macquarie that began in 2008 and has resulted in total original capital commitments of $1.1 billion across 5 funds. Those are Macquarie Infrastructure Partners, Funds 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The MGETS proposal was presented to and discussed with TexGlow investment management staff and the Townsend Group in meetings and conversations with Macquarie principals and team members between April and June of this year. And then investment management subsequently performed due diligence on the proposal during May to July. In addition, Macquarie principals and team members made a detailed presentation to the IAC in Townsend on July 13th. Following that presentation, the IAC voted unanimously to recommend the proposed investment to the School Land Board. 4 of the 5 members of the IAC were present and voted. In conjunction with this ongoing discussion, review, and analysis, investment management worked with Townsend and legal counsel to ensure that the investment fits within the framework of the TexGlow PSF investment policy statement and is in the best interest of the Permanent School Fund. Therefore, the IAC is recommending that School Land Board approve the investment of $300 million in Macquarie GIG Energy Transition Solutions. And also, I would note, as usual, the school land board's approval of this transaction is contingent upon investment management's completion of the negotiation and finalization of the legal documentation associated with the proposed investment. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
None for me.
Okay, is there a motion to approve item number 7?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this agenda item affords the school land board the opportunity to consider the release of funds during fiscal years 2024 and 2025 from the real estate special fund account, which I'll call RESFA, to either the Available School Fund or the Texas Permanent School Fund Corporation, which I'll call TexPerm, for investment in the Permanent School Fund. Just a little background to help you understand where we are now. Until December 31st of this year, Section 51413A of the Natural Resources Code authorizes the school land board by resolution to release funds from the RESFA to either the Available School Fund or to the State Board of Education for investment in the Permanent School Fund. However, following upon the creation of Texas Permanent School Fund Corporation in 2021 by the state legislature, and beginning after December 31st of this year, that section of the Natural Resources Code authorizes the school land board to release funds from the RESFA to either the Available School Fund or to the Texas Permanent School Fund Corporation for investment in the Permanent School Fund. Further, Article 7, Section 5G of the Constitution limits the amount that can be released from the RESFA by the school land board to the Available School Fund to $600 million per year. Further, Title 31 of the Texas Administrative Code, Section 151.6, requires myself, the Chief Investment Officer of the General Land Office, to perform an analysis regarding the potential release of money from the RESFA by July 31st of each even-numbered year, provide the results of the analysis to the board, and make recommendations to the board concerning the potential release of money from the RESFA. Accordingly, I have performed that analysis required by Title 31. And that analysis is on page 2 of a memo that you have. And you can see that the analysis reveals the amount available for release in fiscal year 2024 would be $515 million. And the amount available for release in fiscal year 2025 would be $565 million, for a total amount of $1.08 billion. That section of the administrative code also provides flexibility, however, to the school land board to determine the actual amounts to be released in each of the individual years of the next approaching fiscal biennium and the actual dates of those releases. To aid the board in making its decisions, I have attached a spreadsheet that describes 2 options available to the board for consideration, along with a summary of the past releases from the RESFA. If you'll turn to that page, you can see at the top, I've put the amounts that the analysis determined would be available, which are 515 in fiscal year 24 and 565 in fiscal year 25. And under that, I've shown option A and option B. Option A is the results of the analysis that I just described, but option B is a scenario in which you release instead $600 million per year for each of the years 2024 and 25. Also, I've provided a history of all the releases for you. And you can see it goes all the way through 2023. And I would point out that the amount of revenue that is coming in this year is much higher than normal. We expect that we're going to be significantly above $3 billion when we complete the fiscal year at the end of this month. And we're already right at $3 billion now. So there's a tremendous amount of money coming in, primarily from elevated oil and gas prices, but also from the portfolio itself. The portfolio has reached a point of maturity on its life cycle and is beginning to generate significant distributions. So I'm going to recommend that you release a total no less than 1.8 billion for the fiscal biennium and up to 1.2 billion, which would be 600 million a year. The determination is yours to make as a board. But as I said, there's a tremendous amount of money flowing into the program now. So that money would be released from the RESPA during fiscal years, as I said, 2024 and 25 to the available school fund. I'm also recommending that the total annual amount of each release be completed in 4 equal quarterly installments of each approved annual amount during each of the fiscal years 2024 and 25. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Rusty, it's the difference between option A and option B is just the fact that so much revenue has come into the school land board. The 600, the 515 to 600 is just a number you feel that's adequate.
I thought it was appropriate to, well, first of all, show the results of the analysis, which resulted in 515 and 565. But then also to point out to you that you have flexibility to release whatever amount you want up to a maximum of $600 million per year, which would be the 1.2 billion. So there are any number of options that I could have put in there, but those seem like the two most likely for you to consider, particularly in light of the amount of revenue flowing into the RESPA at this point.
I would say the 515, the 565, that's historically looking at releases are 6% number that we typically use, but the 600, as you stated, that's our constitutional maximum.
Correct.
That we're allowed to.
Okay, so it's a based on a percentage basis is the release. And Rusty, would you tell me again, did you say the revenues have come in as 3 billion year to date, or you anticipate by year end?
Right at 3 billion through June of this year.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I would certainly say, looking at these numbers,
Good job, Rusty.
yes, I think that's where you begin is thank you to you and your team, and thank you to the board for managing these assets. These numbers are staggering. I mean,
They're staggering. Jeez.
And you got to give credit to Hatter and his staff too.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And just to have the potential to release the 600 million per year is going to be incredible for education in this state. I know when the voters moved to hit that cap to increase it to 600 million, I didn't think you'd get there, honestly, this quickly. I had no doubt in you that you would get there, but to be able to bump up against that cap for 24 and 25, that's some pretty exciting stuff.
That is. It absolutely is. Good work.
Thank you.
This is Michael. I'd like to see us go with the 1.2 billion total, considering, the population growth we're experiencing and inflation. I think we need to do all we can. That's a decision we need to make right now, Rusty, or is that you're setting the range?
Yes, you need to make that decision now. We have to notify several different parties no later than September 1st of the decision.
Okay. That's my initial thought.
I agree.
I will take that as a motion to release our constitutional cap of 600 million per year, and a second, and that is approved unanimously. Thank you again for
Good
everything.
job, Rusty
Thank you.
and Robert.
Team effort. Everybody's
Yeah.
deserves credit for it.
And next item on the agenda is item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. This is a non-voting item. This is the quarterly investment report for the TexGlo PSF investment portfolio through March 31st of this year. And as you know, the performance measurement calculations, the statistical data in the report were prepared by State Street Bank and its private edge group. They are the custodial accounting and performance measurement agents for the portfolio. Before I get to the actual performance data, which is spectacular, I want to give you a little bit of an executive summary to talk about sort of macro conditions and what markets are looking like. At the end of the first quarter, actually GDP decreased at an annual rate of 1.6% in the U.S. economy. That was following an increase of 6.9% for the fourth quarter of last year. And that decrease reflected the continued economic impact of COVID-19, characterized by continued restrictions and disruptions in the operations of businesses in some parts of the country. The U.S. unemployment rate ended the quarter at 3.6%, and that was down from 3.9% at the end of 2021, again, reflecting continuing efforts to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic. As far as the Fed is concerned, as you know, they had not done anything for 2 years. We were sitting basically at 0% interest rates and buying a lot of treasuries and asset-backed securities, but citing strengthening economic activity, elevated inflation, strong job gains, and the war in Ukraine, the FOMC actually raised its target Fed funds rate in March of this year from a range of 0 to 0.25%, up to 0.25% to 0.5%. That was the first change in Fed funds since a series of actions they took back in March of 2020, so 2 years ago, when they decreased Fed funds rate all the way down to 0. They also stated at that March meeting that they anticipated that there were going to be ongoing increases in the target range as appropriate, and they expected to begin reducing their holdings of Treasury securities, agency debt, and agency mortgage-backed securities. They also stated they would continue to monitor the implications of a wide range of incoming information for the economic outlook and would continue to be prepared to adjust the stance of monetary policy as appropriate if risk emerged that could impede the attainment of their goals. Turning to the U.S. commercial real estate market as measured by the NCREIF Property Index, or NPI. That index returned 5.33% for the quarter, ended March 31st. The trailing one-year return on NPI was just under 22% at 21.86%. That is the highest since the first quarter of 1980 and the second highest in the 44-year history of the NPI. Those returns were attributable to improved performance across all property types, but particularly the continued outperformance of industrial warehouse properties. The first quarter gross total returns for each of the individual sectors were hotel was up 1.76%, office up 1.60%, retail 2.26%, apartment had a strong quarter at 5.25%, and industrial was just under another astounding quarter of 11% at 10.96%. Again, industrial best performing sector by far during the quarter, and that was, of course, due to continued strong performance in the industrial warehouse space. Industrial has now led all property types in performance since the first quarter of 2016. Turning to the energy markets, more good news. WTI spot crude oil prices averaged just over $95 a barrel during the quarter and ended the quarter slightly over $100 a barrel at $100.53. That was a 33% increase from the fourth quarter ending price, and it was an 82% year over year increase. Prices reached their highest levels since 2014 during the quarter. That was primarily due to oil demand ramping back up to near pre-COVID levels. Significant supply disruptions, of course, related to the Russia and Ukrainian conflict, years of industry underdevelopment, historically low inventories, and the absence of an Iranian nuclear deal. Also of note was OPEC Plus agreed in March to a 432,000 barrel per day quota hike beginning in May. Many analysts now believe there are a number of bullish supply risks that could appear in the second half of this year and propel crude prices even higher. Those are Libya's fragile peace environment, continued bipartisan backlash against easing Venezuelan sanctions, continued diminished hopes for an Iranian nuclear deal during the year, and anticipated reduction in Iraqi production. As far as gas is concerned, Henry Hub natural gas spot prices averaged $4.67 per million BTUs during the quarter. They ended the quarter at $5.46 per million BTUs. That was a 43% increase from the fourth quarter ending price and a 111% year over year increase. Subsequent to quarter end, natural gas prices continued to ramp up, increasing to their highest level since 2008. However, those prices still are very volatile. The front of the strip curve is hovering around 650 per million BTUs right now, and the back is hovering in the $4 per million BTU range. Very volatile. Gas market has continued to remain tight, primarily due to strong inelastic power demand and strong LNG and Mexican exports. On the supply side, constraints from reduced storage inventories, lower anticipated domestic production, and expected continued industry capital discipline should also be bullish for natural gas prices going forward. And the portfolio's focus during the rest of the year is going to remain centered on exploring opportunities in the infrastructure space, while secondarily exploring niche opportunities in real estate and co-investment opportunities in energy. Moving to the actual performance numbers now, if you look at page 2 of the report, the total NAV of the portfolio at the end of March was just over $6.7 billion. The portfolio itself was about 6.1 billion of that, or 91%. The rest was in cash equivalent investments. Looking at the performance itself, again, continued outstanding performance. As far as gross returns without cash for the quarter, the portfolio was up 12.18% versus 5.18% on the benchmark. So an outperformance of 700 basis points for the quarter. The real estate sector was up just over 8% for the quarter. Infrastructure was up a little over 3%, and energy for the quarter was up 21%, 20.95% just for the quarter in energy. Of course, the resulting one-year returns for the portfolio are just amazing. The gross return, one-year return.
Michael, do you have page 2?
Say again?
Do you have page?
It's in a separate document. I found it.
Oh, it's on a separate document. Okay, hold on.
Yeah. There were 2 item number 9s that were emailed out to us. One of them is that just that summary table.
I've only got one number 9. Let me look around here. Sorry. Go ahead then. Go ahead. I don't have the second. Go ahead.
Okay. So the one-year returns at March 31st, if you recall the last meeting, I gave you the returns at December 31st and told you how outstanding they were. They were around 37% gross and 30% net on the portfolio at the end of December. At the end of March, the gross return is 43.72%. The net is over 37%, 37.05%. That compares to the benchmark at just a hair over 18%. So we outperformed the benchmark by 2,571 basis points. Just tremendous performance. The energy sector of the portfolio, 1-year return was 77.14%. Infrastructure was 16.68%, and real estate was 34.78%. Those are all 1-year returns for each of the sectors. Phenomenal performance. All of the measurement periods, 3, 5, and 10 years were outstanding. 3-year was 11.29% versus 9.18 on the benchmark, outperformance by 211 basis points. 5-year return was 12.26% versus 8.03 on the benchmark, outperformance 423 basis points. And then the 10-year return. So this is an average annual return every year for 10 years, 13.72% versus 8.49 on the benchmark, outperformance of 523 basis points. As you know, the policy return is the rolling 5-year return net of fees. And even looking on that basis, the portfolio 5-year average annual return net of fees was 9.66% versus 5.58 benchmark. So 408 basis points outperformance there. Again, outstanding performance all around. At the end of the quarter, there was about 22% of our existing capital commitments that remained unfunded, 20% of real estate, 30% of infrastructure, and just 17% of energy. Turning to page 3 of the report, and we'll look at page 3 and page 15. Page 3 is an update on new investments. As you can see on page 3, you approved one new $150 million capital commitment during the first quarter, and that was to PEP Production Partners 2. Their investment strategy focuses on acquiring and operating producing oil and gas properties in high quality U.S. basins. On page 15, you can see the activity subsequent to the first quarter. During the period, the second quarter period, you approved 2 new fund investments and 1 new co-investment. Capital Co-Investments 18 is a newly created co-investment vehicle formed to co-invest alongside First Reserve in a U.S. focused upstream strategy. EnCap Energy Transition Fund 2 is a new closed-end fund that will continue to make investments centered around the decarbonization of the U.S. power sector and other opportunities created by the continuing global transition to a lower carbon energy system. And EnCap Flat Rock Midstream Fund 5 is a new fund that will continue to make investments focused on the North American midstream energy opportunity set, consisting primarily of greenfield and brownfield hydrocarbon and energy evolution opportunities. As far as allocations, asset allocations go, if you'll look at pages 7 or 8, on a purely invested basis or net asset value basis, the portfolio allocation to real estate at the end of March was 32% versus a target of 33%. Infrastructure was at 24% versus a target of 36%. And energy was at 45% versus a target of 31%. The fact that the infrastructure is under its target by almost 12 points is primarily because that portion of our portfolio is rather mature. There's a lot of capital being returned. There are a lot of new commitments that you're making, and until those turn into new investments, they will be, that sector will look under allocated. Energy, of course, and prices and values are very high right now. So that's why there's so much energy is such a higher number over the target, 45% versus 31%. All those targets are the targets, they reflect the targets you adopted in April of last year. And of course, they were designed to reduce exposure in the portfolio to extreme levels of volatility associated with the energy sector going forward. But over time, those allocations will align more properly with allocation targets as the board makes new capital commitments in the various sectors and as more of those capital commitments are funded. On page 8, you can see what the allocations look like on an invested plus unfunded commitments basis. And their real estate was at 30% versus a target of 33%. Infrastructure is at 29% versus a target of 36%, and energy was at 41% versus a target of 31%. As far as geographic diversification on pages 11 to 12, you can see that the allocation to the U.S. right now is about 95% of the portfolio. The target is 90%, which means the international allocation is about 5% compared to a target of 10%. Those targets, again, reflect the new targets adopted by the board in April 21st, and those will move around as more investments in the international side of the portfolio that are currently unfunded become funded. And finally, as far as investment manager exposure is concerned, on pages 13 to 14 of the report, you can see on a purely invested basis, we're well diversified across a platform of 25 different managers. Our investment policy statement limits us to no more than 20% of the total NAV to any one manager. We are well within that range at the end of March. The top 5 highest exposures are NCAP Energy at 13%, Lime Rock Resources at 12%, USAA Equity Advisors at 11.5%, Macquarie Infrastructure Partners at 8.75%, and Clarion at 7.9%. Co-investment vehicles are grouped by manager and presented separately. The highest grouped co-investment exposures at the end of March were First Reserve at 6.28%, BlackRock at 2.50%, and Intervest at 2.39%. That concludes my presentation. Again, this is a non-voting item, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, congratulations to the board, investment advisory committee, and staff, and all those involved in the effectiveness of the fund and the outstanding performance. Happy to answer any questions.
It's good numbers, good performance. The rest, I wish we could personally invest in sidecars. If you need sidecars, let me know.
Okay. Duly noted.
Well, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't note, I think you've done an excellent job of managing these assets along with the IAC, but it is interesting to see where a lot of funds in similar situations are either shying away from traditional oil and gas investment or calling for divestment outright, recognizing there has been a lot of volatility in that sector over the past 24 months. What was the quarterly return on that on the energy sector?
Well, the quarterly return was just under 21%. And the 1-year return was 77%.
77%. That's so it looks like
Mark,
it paid off staying the course on that one.
Yeah, Mark, and I mean, in the prospect of 90 plus oil is out there. The prospect there is strong, and then you have natural gas, Rusty. That's really at $8 right now, and as these LNG terminals get completed in the Gulf Coast and supply is diminishing, it's going to be an awful interesting natural gas market as we shift from just being a U.S. market to an international market, and which it's $60 an MMBTU in Europe, and we're at $8 here. So
yeah,
it's going to be amazing what happens.
Certainly is. Well, I appreciate it. And that being a non-voting item, there is no further business for the school and board. The meeting is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Bye.